Hey everybody, today is Tuesday, September 10th, and we are discussing encumbrances. We know what encumbrances are, and we know that an easement is a type of encumbrance, and we just in the previous hour learned about two types of easements. And now we're discussing how easements are created. So when we concluded the previous hour, we had learned that easements can be created by written agreements. They're created out of necessity. Someone needs access, and the law allows that person to have access to the property, even if that means they have to cross over someone else's property. And we also learned about easements by condemnation, which are created with the government's right of eminent domain. So we left off on easement by prescription or adverse possession. And possession is when you own something, right? It's yours. You have ownership of it. And adverse, we learned it means it's negative or contrary. So adverse possession. This is kind of an odd one. So let's take a look, okay, guys? So easement by prescription or adverse possession is a legal doctrine that allows a person to claim a property right in land owned by another. What? Yeah, so this is a legal concept that allows someone to legally claim ownership of another person's property without paying for it. Yeah, let's see how this works. Now, guys, there in the law, there's this commonality in the law that says landowners who sleep on their land, who sleep on their rights, are usually punished. Basically, the spirit of the law is you don't want any land to go unused and be unproductive. So if you have your land and you're not doing anything with it and you're not watching over it carefully, you can be punished. So by favoring the adverse possessor, that's the person who's trying to take it, over the true landowner, the doctrine of adverse possession rewards the productive use of land and punishes landowners who sleep on their rights. So in other words, it's like the old phrase goes. Y'all heard that phrase? You snooze, you lose. Have y'all ever heard that? You snooze, you lose. Yeah. So the law kind of has that same outlook towards land ownership. So common examples of adverse possession include continuous use of a private road or driveway, or agricultural development of an unused parcel of land. So basically, guys, this is a concept that if you have a piece of land and you're not using it, and somebody else comes along and they start using it over a certain amount of time, if they meet a certain criteria, they can legally claim ownership of your land without paying you for it. Wow. So let's learn about this. Anthony says, how is that possible? I'm going to show you, Anthony. Okay, so in order for someone to claim adverse possession, they have to meet this criteria, okay? The usage has to be open and notorious, exclusive, hostile, for a prescribed statutory period, and the usage also has to be continuous and uninterrupted. Yeah, so let's take a closer look right here, okay? Anthony, let's go over these and maybe it might come into focus for you. The first thing is, now guys, I'm going to give you an analogy. Anthony, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to give you guys an analogy, okay? To kind of see how this concept may work. And you guys know I love doing relationship analogies, right? I'd like to relate things to relationships. You guys have heard me use relationship analogies a lot. Okay. Let's say that you're married. you're married, but you're kind of sleeping on your rights. You're kind of on cruise control in your relationship. Okay? You're married, that's your spouse, but you're kind of in cruise control in the marriage. The spark is gone. So keep that in mind as we go through these. The first one has to be open and notorious. The person seeking adverse possession must occupy a parcel of land in a manner that is open and obvious. So Anthony, the person using your land has to be doing it openly and in an obvious manner. The person may not occupy the land secretively or make efforts to remain undetected. So you guys know that my mom gave me her land. I have 60 acres. So if somebody was trying to use my land, they would have to be using it on the half that you can see from the road, not the half that's down in the woods that you can't see. So they've got to be using the land openly and obviously, and making no secrets about it. But here's the catch, Anthony. A landowner is not required, however, to have actual knowledge of the occupation. So someone's just got to be using it, but they don't have, the landowner doesn't have to know about it. Kind of like if, your spouse starts talking to another person. They could start having lunch with somebody and you don't know about it. They could be sending them text messages, talking to their friends about them, but you don't know about it, but they're doing it. Okay, so open and notorious. Other thing is exclusive. The land must be occupied exclusively by the person seeking adverse possession and may not be shared with the public or the true owner. So it's got to be just that person using the land. So let's say somebody's come down to where my land is at the end of the road right there. It's still on the road and they put in a trailer or a tiny house. And it's just them. They're using my land. Hostile. The occupation must be hostile and adverse to the interest of the true owner. So they're using your land without your permission. If the landowner has given a person permission to use the property, the possession is not considered a hostile. Okay? Again, a landowner is not required to have actual knowledge of the occupation. So they're using their land and it's against it's against what you would want them to be doing on your land. It's hostile. It's adverse. Statutory period. And Anthony, this is kind of the catch right here. It has to be all of these, Jill. Jill's asking, can it be any of these or all? Got to be all. Possession of the land must continue for the state's statutory period. That's why it's called easement by prescription, the prescribed amount of time. The statutory period for adverse possession may be as short as 3 years or as long as 20 years and varies by state. Here in Alabama, it's 20 years, which is a long time to be using somebody's land. I think in California, don't quote me, but I think in California, it's 3 years. 10 years in Texas. Jill says 18 in Colorado. See, it varies. It varies. And then the next requirement is continuous and uninterrupted. It says all elements, there you go, Jill, all elements of adverse possession must be met at all times during the statutory period. Okay? So again, you're doing this over that prescribed amount of time. Open and notorious, exclusive, hostile, statutory period, continuous, and interrupted. Callie is 5 years. Anthony says Callie is 5 years. Yeah. So guys, listen. Hey, after They've been using it this whole time. You didn't know about it. You never told them no, because you didn't know, but you never told them no. It was exclusive. It was just them. It was hostile, which is against what you would want to be happening. They did it for a prescribed amount of time, and it was just them. It was continuous and uninterrupted. Then they can take your land. Or if we were talking about a relationship, they could take your spouse. Okay. Anthony says, it's just so crazy to me. It is crazy, Anthony. It is totally crazy, which is why Alabama says, nah, 20 years. But listen, let me give you an example, Anthony. I saw this in the news a couple of years ago, and I want to follow up on the story, okay? Maryland says, who pays the property taxes? I guess the adverse possessor would, because Maryland, you know, you can pay anybody's property taxes, right? Well, you can in most states. I think California is a little different about it. But in most states, you can just go online and pay somebody's property taxes. So let me tell you guys a story. I read a story about a man who had moved into a house in an affluent neighborhood. Okay, a big old nice house in an affluent neighborhood, in a desired neighborhood, right? And the neighbors were upset because the man was living there because he wanted to claim adverse possession. Well, here's what happened. The original owners of the house had a mortgage on the house. The original owners went into foreclosure. That the lender foreclosed. The lenders evicted the owners, the first owners, you know, did the foreclosure process, evicted them. So the bank owned the property. It was a bank-owned property. House was vacant. The bank that owned the house went bankrupt. The bank that owned the house went out of business. And so now somebody else owned the bank that owned the house. And this is when the man moved in. The man's been moving in the house because the ownership of the bank and all their properties is kind of tied up in the courts, tied up in the bankruptcy. So there's no one to pursue that man. There's no one to force that man out of the house, right? Because who's the true owner of the house? And his neighbors, the neighbors are mad about it because the man's got the lights on, the water on, he's paying the taxes. And who knows how long it's going to take that mess of that bank and their properties to get sorted out. And then you've got to start the whole process with the man. So, Anthony, you remember hearing this story? I'm not sure how it's turned out. It was a while ago that I came across this story. Yeah. And the neighbors were really upset about it, but I mean, what could you do? So, yeah. But that's adverse possession. That's what it is. So if you own any land, if you own any property that you don't visit on a regular basis, you better start going and looking at it. You got to check it out. All right. Resonate says easement by prescription is not the same as adverse possession, right? Easement by prescription is like trespassing. Resonate, there is a technical difference between the two of them. Easement by prescription, that's why I have easement by prescription / adverse possession. But the differences are, it gets kind of like splitting hairs, Resonate, that we've always just kind of lumped them into one because you guys don't need to know it that exact. Okay. That makes sense. You're welcome, sweetie. You're welcome. So adverse possession, and we typically talk more about adverse possession. All right, guys. So if you own some property, get down there and check it out. Go check out your property. That's why I have to go check on my little country house every week. Even though my little country house is on a main road, you know, I still gotta, my mom and one of my good friends will go and check on it for me. All right. So, guys, now listen, you may see this in a question, a scenario-based question where they're describing the situation. And remember, in order to claim, in order for it to be adverse possession, remember, the owner does not have to be aware of it. It's not a requirement that the original owner knows about it. Okay? That's why I say it's kind of like if you have a marriage and one of the spouse starts to date someone else. It's really like that, right? If they keep dating that other person for so long, eventually you're going to have some adverse possession. And the other spouse isn't required to know. And it's exclusive. It's that other person this whole time, and it's hostile, prescribed amount of time. That's why in my mind it kind of seems like that. So that's a little analogy that I use to remember the concept. Because eventually that other person is gonna take your spouse. All right. Let's talk about real estate. So going back to the family agricultural example, a farmer can take over land by farming it for years. Yes. Moving into another farmer's moving into another farmer's acreage foot by foot over the years. Yes. So that's a common example you see on the real estate exam. It'll say a farmer plowed 50 feet over the property line and kept plowing it and farming the land 50 feet over the property line year after year after year. If he eventually gained ownership of this land, what is that an example of? Adverse possession. Yes. Okay. Sujinder says, can we practice these scenario type questions? Sujinder, I think I have a couple of them in my exams. I'll look and see. I'll go through my questions and see if I have some that are like that. But the thing is, you just got to ask, you just got to know, Sujinder, if you know this right here, if you just remember these 5 things, you'll have it. Okay. It's open and notorious. And remember, Sujinder, the true owner doesn't have to know. And that's usually the catch to these questions. Exclusive, hostile, statutory period, and continuous uninterrupted. And guys, I remember when I took my state exam, there was a question about a rose garden. And I really didn't understand what the question was asking me, but later when I learned more about adverse possession, I was like, oh, okay, that was it. Anthony says, if the owner sells those crops, what happens? The one that's plowing over the property line, Anthony? The crops don't have anything to do with it, Anthony. It's the fact that he's on the land. He's plowing that land over and over. He's over there making use of that land repeatedly, year after year. It has nothing to do with the crops. He could just be plowing it and not growing anything on it. Just the fact that he's over there making use of it. He's on it. Okay? There you go. That's like one thing I've got to do is my little fixer-upper house in the country, in the backyard, my neighbor's land, my neighbors weren't cutting their bushes and stuff, and I had my property line marked off with a string. Well, my neighbors had all those bushes cut down, which was good, but they knocked down my string. So now I don't know exactly where my property line is anymore. So I've got to go out there and remark my property line, because I don't want my neighbors encroaching on my property. All right. Good job, guys. Now let's talk about termination of easements. Okay, how can these easements be terminated? It says easements may be created for a specific amount of time, or they may exist forever. The duration of the easement depends on the specific state laws where the property is located. And again, that's another reason why it's kind of hard sometimes to talk about easements, because as students, you guys want specifics, right? But in the real world, it's kind of hard to be specific because every market is different. Every state and every county and every city is a little bit different. All right. The following can terminate an easement. So here are some ways that an easement can end. Expiration. Okay, so if there was an expiration date, some easements have an expiration date when established, or can only exist for a set amount of time per state law. The easement will end, I got my words covered up here, once the expiration date passes or the statutory period ends. So again, expiration. So when it was created, may not go on forever, may have an expiration date, or the state law may curb how long it could last. Another one is an agreement. If the holder of the dominant tenement, that's the one that's landlocked, right? Executes a quitclaim deed. Oops, my chat just disappeared. Sorry, guys. Oops, there we go. Okay, if the holder of the dominant tenement executes a quitclaim deed and transfers ownership of the dominant tenement to the owner of the servient tenement, the easement is terminated. So in other words, the person that owned property A, the dominant tenement, gave their land to the owner of property B, the servient tenement. That would end the easement, right? Because now one person owns both properties. Abandonment. In some states, if a party holds an easement and intentionally does not use it for the statutory period as required by law, the easement terminates. Some states limit this type of termination to easements created by prescription only. So let's say that you basically got a piece of land by easement by prescription, but you didn't make use of it after it was awarded to you. You abandoned it. Then that will terminate your easement. Destruction. In an easement appurtenant, if the servient tenement is destroyed, the easement ends. That's gone. Merger. If both party acquires ownership of both the dominant and servient tenements, the easement is terminated because the easement will no longer need it as one person now owns both properties. That sounds like what we just said on the first slide, right? That's a lot like agreement. End of purpose. If an easement created for a particular purpose and that purpose ends, the easement is terminated. So different ways. I'm going to go back and look over this one, because this one doesn't make sense to me. I'll be honest with you guys. In an easement appurtenance, if the servient tenement is destroyed, that's the one serving a purpose, the easement ends. Huh. Yeah, but it seems like if the servient tenement is destroyed, the dominant tenement still needs to get to the road. So it seems like it would be if the dominant tenement is destroyed. I'm gonna ask Miss Linda about that one. That one sounds a little backwards. I'm gonna get a little more information on that one. Gary says first slide is when easement is quit claimed, merger, whereas merger is properties transferred. I don't know, Gary, that's what I was saying. It sounds like agreement and merger are the same thing. Like agreement would be how you did it with an agreement. And then merger seems like the act of them being merged together. They seem kind of redundant to me. That's what I say. I want to double check on those two. Gary says, I think agreement is just removing an easement. No, but the end result is executes a quitclaim deed and transfers ownership. Okay, so Jill's thinking merger is if it gives agreement is when you give it to someone, and merger is if they buy it. I don't know. I'm gonna look into those because those, I don't know, they kind of seem like the same thing. I'm gonna look into them. I'm gonna go get my language of real estate book out and take a look. But the point is, guys, just in case you see a question that says, how all of the following are ways to terminate an easement except, that's where I think we would see these in a question like that. Real estate says, how about if the land is washed away? That would be destruction. Oh, you know what? That's a good example. Destruction by natural causes. Oh, you know what? You might be onto something there. Okay, so if you're saying, like, let's go back to my picture right here. Right here, let's say we've got this easement, and let's say this lake floods for some reason, and now the lake comes to right here. Is that what you're saying? And now all of this is underwater. That would end the easement. This is destroyed. Okay. I see what you're talking about. I'm getting it. I think we're cooking with Crisco now. Okay. Hey, I learned something new today. That totally makes sense to me. Yeah. Kind of like what we're seeing off of, is it in North Carolina? I saw a video on the news of this house falling into the Atlantic Ocean. Did y'all see that house? It fell into the Atlantic Ocean because they're building, they built all these houses on these barrier islands, and the houses are literally falling into the ocean now. Good example. Thank you for that. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, real estate. Also in San Francisco, they're falling into the ocean. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Resident says Hawaii. Yeah, Hawaii. Hawaii is, you guys realize that Hawaii is a chain of volcanic activity, right? Those are literally volcanoes peeking out of the water. So I'm always kind of shocked when everybody's surprised when there's a volcano activity. There's the volcano activity in Hawaii because that's literally how they were created. Yes, scary business. Okay. Resney says a lot of avulsion and accretion there. Yeah, a whole lot of avulsion going on over there. Definitely accretion too, right? Okay. Now, Something else that is different from an easement is a license. This is another vocabulary word for you guys to know. License. A license is oral permission from the property owner to make use of the property. It is not a real property interest. So again, it's not an easement. It's just oral permission to use somebody's property. It doesn't run with the land and can be revoked at any time. So in other words, let's say you've got your neighbor and neighbor says, hey, can I fish in your pond? And the neighbor says, sure, you can feel free to come over and fish in my pond, not a problem. But if this neighbor moves, if he moves and sells the land with the pond, then does this neighbor still have a license to fish on it? No, not at all, right? They've got to make friends with the new owner and get that license back, right? It doesn't run with the land. It's just oral permission to use their property. Real estate says, or like to hunt. That's right. Like to hunt. Okay. Any more questions about easements? No? We're all good on easements? All right. Let's move over to liens. I like talking about liens. I'm not sure why, but I like talking about it. So a lien is a monetary charge against property as security for the payment of a debt or an obligation owed for services rendered. A lien. So a lien is considered a financial encumbrance on the property. It's a financial encumbrance. But before we talk about liens, let's learn about loans, because we have to understand loans before we talk about liens, because a loan and a lien are two different things. Okay, some loans are unsecured and some loans are secured. An unsecured loan, this is a loan that is not supported by collateral. Okay, you guys, this is another great vocabulary word. What is collateral? What is collateral? What is collateral? Real estate says a down payment or a thing. It's more like a thing. There you go, like car or jewelry. Yeah. Olga says something that you'll lose if you can't pay back. Yes. Letitia says a house. Yes. Haley says something someone can take if you default. Norenko says an asset that gives cover to the loan if you default. Yes, you guys know what that is. So collateral is when you're borrowing money, you are putting up something of value, something physical. It's usually something physical, put your hands on it, that you're giving up. You're giving the lender the rights to take that property from you if you can't repay the loan. So in a home loan, it's the house. The house is serving as collateral for the loan. For a car note, it is the car. Because you guys know what happens if you don't pay your car note, right? They come and get your car, right? Well, nowadays they just have those little switches in them. They can just turn your car off. They no longer try to come and physically get it from you because that's dangerous, right? So again, an unsecured loan is a loan that is not supported by any collateral. Okay. A credit card is generally considered to be an unsecured loan. So credit cards are just based on your credit score. Now, on the other hand, you have a secured loan. A secured loan is supported by collateral, like a car loan or home loan. So if you don't make your payments, the lender's going to come and get your car, or if you don't make your home loan payments, you may be facing foreclosure. So that's an unsecured loan and a secured loan, and unsecured and a secured loan. Okay, so you guys got the difference between those two, right? I want to make sure you got that before we talk about the lien. All right. So in a secured loan, the lender will place a lien against the collateral as security for the loan. All right. So in other words, a lien is a type of financial encumbrance that ties the performance of paying a debt to ownership of a specific property. All right. So in other words, you're going to have this lien on your property as long as you're making those payments. And again, that lien is what's allowing that lender to take that property from you if you don't pay as you promised you would. Right? So what happens, guys, as soon as that loan is made, that lender is going to record that lien in the public records. So in order for these liens to be effective, a lien must be recorded in the county where the property is located. So what this means for homeowners, guys, is when you buy that house, the moment you have that closing, that lender is going to take those documents and they're going to record them in the public records to create a lien on your property. Okay. And this recording of this lien is an example of let's just say constructive notice. And when they put this lien on your property, that's what creates that when they put the lien on your property, that's what creates the cloud on your title. Okay. Now, when the lien holder does it, it doesn't give them a right of ownership, but it does give them a limited right to force the sale of the secured property to pay the obligation should the owner default on payments of the lien. All right. So guys, why do you think the lender is doing this? So when you get a home mortgage, a home loan, the lender's gonna go record the lien in the property in the county where your property is located. Why is the lender doing this to you? Doesn't the lender trust you? Anthony says insurance that you'll pay, kinda. Gary, you don't think the lender trusts you to make your payments? Gary, you seem like a stand-up guy. You're gonna make your payments. Jill says so the lender can get their money by law. Jill's right. Why does the lender do this? They do it to give security to their loans. It's protecting their interest. Remember, that house is the lender's collateral. And if you don't pay, then the lender's going to have to foreclose on you, get that property back, and sell it in order to get their money back. Okay? That's why they do it. It protects their interest in the loan, in the property. It also prevents you from selling the house without paying off your lender first. Imagine if you could, how many of you guys have home loans right now? How many of you guys have a mortgage payment, a mortgage note? Could you imagine how nice it would be if you could just sell your house without having to pay off your mortgage? Could you imagine how nice that would be? If you could just sell your house right now and not have to pay off your existing mortgage. Oh, wow. It would be mind-boggling, right? Jill says, but not for the bank. All right. So let's take a look, and I'm gonna take us back to loans, parts of a home loan for a second, so you guys can really have a good idea what's happening here. Okay, we're gonna do a little bit of loan, a little bit of finance knowledge. Okay, so a loan actually consists of two parts. Home loans actually consist of two parts. And those of you that bought houses before, you have signed these documents. You just didn't remember doing it because there's like a million things to sign when you get a home. All right. The first one is a promissory note. And this is simply an IOU. Okay. This is where you're telling the lender, hey, I owe you some money and I promise that I'm going to pay you back. And I'm going to borrow $200,000 from you at 5% interest. I'm going to take 30 years to pay you back. My payment's going to be $800 a month. It's going to be due on the 1st. It's considered late on the 6th. You know, it's all of just the numbers for your loan payment, okay? For your loan. All right. But there's no mechanism here in this promissory note to protect the lender. Okay. This is like the cool parent. All right. This is the cool parent. Okay. The cool parent lets you do what you want to do. All right. Well, we need something though. We need another document to enforce the terms of the promissory note. All right. So loans also have another thing called a security document or security instrument, or sometimes called a financing instrument. This is the document, the security instrument that's backing up the promissory note. This would be the mean parent, the disciplinarian. Okay. You know, you always have that fun parent, and then you always have that mean parent. You guys know what I'm talking about? That's how my household was. There was the fun kind of, well, he's more hands-off parent. And then you got that disciplinarian parent. All right. Mom is always the mean parent, right? Aren't we always the mean disciplinary ones? Okay. The security instrument is the document that enforces what you promised to do in the IOU. And this is the document where you have pledged the property as collateral for the loan. So one, you've pledged your title in that house as collateral for the loan. And two, you have already given the lender permission to foreclose on you if you cannot pay as you promised you would in the promissory note. Ooh, very strong document here. That's why it's called a security instrument. But it's giving security to the lender, not to you, little borrower. Okay. There are two types of security instruments. There's the mortgage and the deed of trust. These are very different. They do similar things, but they're very different. Okay. So when you get a home loan from a bank, you are going to have a promissory note, and you will have either a mortgage or a deed of trust as your security instrument. It just depends on what state you're in and what your lender prefers to use. And there's pros and cons of each. Okay. Here's the deal. You're like, okay, Amanda, this is great and all, but where does the lien coming into all this? Let me finish. What's going to happen after the closing is the lender is going to take your mortgage. Let's say they use a mortgage as a security instrument. The lender's going to take this mortgage document and they're going to record it in the public records. And when they record this mortgage document, that's what creates this lien on your property. Okay. When they file this thing. So let's take this mortgage document and let's make it look like it's leaning on you. Whee! There we go. I'm going to have it leaning on this house. Okay. All right. So when they file it, It creates that lien. And that mortgage document is going to be leaning on that house until you pay it off. All right. It's leaning on the house. I guess I could make it, a pun and say it's leaning on the house. It's leaning on that house until you pay off that promissory note. All right. And then if you go to sell your house, remember, if you go to sell your house, then we're going to do a title search, and the title search is going to discover this financial encumbrance on your house called a lien. Okay, does that make sense how liens are created? You like my visual, Jill? Thank you. Okay. It's going to be leaning on it. Now, let's just take our little conversation one step further. When the borrower pays off the promissory note, when this gets paid in full, paid in full, yay. What is the document that the lender is going to issue that's going to let the whole world know that that promissory note, that loan's been paid in full? Do you guys remember that? That's another vocabulary word. Look at you, Resni. Good job. That's right. When that happens, the lender's going to issue another document called a satisfaction. A satisfaction. Saying that that lien or that mortgage has been satisfied. Satisfaction. Yeah, sound it out, Amanda. Satisfaction. And then that satisfaction will be filed as well in the public records to let everybody know that that loan has been repaid in full. And it removes the cloud. Okay? All right. Jill says, is the satisfaction for a deed of trust, Jill? No. Nuh-uh. For a deed of trust, the lender will issue what's called a release deed or a deed of reconveyance. It's either called a release deed or a deed of reconveyance. Deed of trust is a little more complicated because remember, in a deed of trust, the borrower is going to be giving bare title to somebody while they're making payments. So we got to get that bare title back over to the borrower. So anytime we're transferring title between people, remember, we got to use a deed. Okay. All right. Good deal, guys. Good deal. All right. So let's talk about categories of liens a little bit before we go. Because don't forget, we got another session today. We got a 1:30 session. So yay. All right. Liens can be categorized as either voluntary or involuntary. Voluntary, this is one that you wanted to take part in. You wanted this lien. You did the work to get this lien. An example would be a mortgage lien or a car loan. And believe me, you got to work to get a mortgage, don't you? Yeah. It takes some work to get a mortgage. It's a little nerve-wracking to get a mortgage. Okay. On the other hand, you can have an involuntary lien. A lien that the property owner did not want, but was allowed by the court because of a legitimate debt owed by the property owner. So that would be a property tax lien or an IRS tax lien. Okay, so voluntary, involuntary. Liens can also be specific are general, and this has to do with the collateral involved, okay? Specific. This means a lien that attaches only to specific property, meaning that if the payments are not made, the lien holder may only take a specific piece of property that was serving as collateral for the loan. So in other words, if you don't make your payment, the lender can only come and get that one particular property. Okay, so example would be a mortgage loan. Because when you have a mortgage loan, right, the lender, and they foreclose on you, they're only going to take the house, right? They're not going to take your car or your motor home or your boat. They're taking the house. And then property tax liens. If you don't pay your property taxes, they only put a lien against that property. Can y'all think of another type of specific lien? When you don't make that payment, they're only going to take that one specific thing. Real estate says, just talking about a mechanics lien. Yes, mechanics lien. A mechanics lien to gender. Yes. What about a car note? Wouldn't a car loan be a specific lien as well? Yeah. Okay. Now, general lien. A lien, this is different. In a general lien, they can take all of your stuff. All of your stuff. This is kind of the opposite. Now they can take all of your stuff. A lien that attaches to all non-exempt property in a county or counties in which the lien is recorded, meaning that if payments are not made, the lien holder may take several pieces of property. So this would be a judgment lien or an income tax lien from the IRS. So again, they can put a lien against everything that you own. Now, how are liens created? Two basic ways: through a contract, a contractual lien, a lien that was created between parties with a contract. So an example of this would be our mortgage lien again, or a car loan. You signed a contract to create those loans. Or the other way, you didn't sign a contract, it just happens to you. Statutory, a lien on a property created by a court action or by a statute. Property tax lien or an IRS income tax lien. Okay? That's different ways that liens are created. All right, so let's just go over a couple of types of liens for you guys. I guess I should have done these first and then kind of did how they could be created. So, couple of liens we need to know is an ad valorem tax lien. Guys, ad valorem is just another way of saying property taxes. These are real estate property taxes. Ad valorem is a Latin phrase for according to value, because your property taxes are charged according to the value of the property. So if you don't pay your property taxes, you can have an ad valorem tax lien put against your property. Also, there's something called a special assessment tax lien. So a special assessment tax is a short-term tax used to fund special projects by the government, such as adding sidewalks or streetlights. And it applies only to properties will directly benefit from the project to be funded. So in other words, the government wants to do special project in your neighborhood, but they need some money to pay for the special project. So they just levy this little special assessment tax. And if you don't pay it, wah, wah, they can put a lien against your property. The next one is an IRS tax lien. That's an income tax lien. You didn't pay your income taxes. And a mortgage lien. That's a lien against your property. And this is another one. It's called a mechanics lien or materials men's lien. And first of all, guys, when we say mechanics lien, we're not necessarily talking about the individual that works on your car. even though an actual mechanic could do it. When we say mechanic's lien, we're talking about a contractor. So it could be a general contractor, a builder, a painter, an electrician, a carpenter, a plumber, anyone like that who's come a lawn care service, any business or entity or person that has been on your property, provided a service, and then you didn't pay them. Okay. So again, because that contractor cannot repossess their work because they provided a service, they can't repo anything. So their only avenue is to file a lien against your property. All right. And that is a mechanic's lien. It's involuntary statutory lien. And sometimes I have noticed that contractors will actually file these liens even before your bill is due. They'll just go ahead and do it when they start the work. They just file the lien because they want to be on the safe side. Anthony says, I thought they had 90 days. Anthony, it just depends on your location, what your local laws are. Here in Alabama, I don't think they have to wait the 90 days. Okay. So again, a lot of contractors do this. So if you've hired them to work on your house and you're planning on selling your house, they'll just go ahead and put a lien on your house. So they want to make sure that they get paid when you go to sell that house. So when they do a title search, guess what they're going to discover? There's a mechanic's lien on the house. It'll create a cloud on that title. So, yeah. Also, there's a judgment lien where you've been sued and then ordered to pay somebody some money. That's a judgment lien. This happens a lot of times with credit card debt. If you don't pay off a credit card, the credit card company can sue you, have a judgment lien put against you. And then an abstract of judgment is a summary of the judgment issued by the court. So judgment lien, abstract of judgment. And then an attachment is the act of seizing property in anticipation of a favorable ruling by a plaintiff who claims to be owed money by the defendant. So if you're sued and it looks like you're going to lose and you're thinking, well, you know what? Let me sell off my house and my cars, or let me put it in my mama's name so they can't force me to sell it to pay them this money. Well, sometimes the judge is a 2 steps ahead of you. The judge will say, you know what? We're going to grab that property from you right now to prevent you from transferring your assets. And they'll issue a writ of attachment. A writ of attachment. All right, you guys. It is, it's 1:04. We're a little over. Let's take our little break, 30-minute break. I'll see you guys back at 1:30 and we'll wrap up our discussion of liens. Okie dokie. Sound good? All right, I'll see you guys in 30 minutes. Thank you. Bye.